Hi there, and welcome to another intriguing dose of history on your favorite history channel. In today's video, we'll be detailing the ideology of Nazi Germany and its manifestations during the Second World War. But before we jump right in, kindly give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and smash the notification bell to receive notifications of when we post more enthralling historical videos like this one. Do leave us a comment as well, as we'd love to read your opinion about the rather mythical ideology of Nazi Germany. Now, let's dive in. The Nazi ideology, also called National Socialism ideology, was developed and propagated by Germany's Nazi Party leader Adolf Hitler and dominated every sphere of life in Germany between 1920 and 1945. Nazi ideology was centered upon Hitler's beliefs in German racial superiority and the total rejection of communism. Hitler also rejected the ideas of liberalism, democracy, the rule of law, and human rights, and instead believed that individuals are merely subjects to the state and should maintain strict obedience to their leaders or masters. Nazi ideology also propagated the belief that races are not equal, maintaining that some races were superior to other races and wholly supporting the right of the strong to rule the weak. Nazi ideology encompassed four core components that formed the fundamental basis of Nazi belief. These four core components are political ideology, economic ideology, racial supremacy or social ideology, and military ideology. Political ideology. Nazi political ideology was completely centered around Hitler as the supreme leader. Historians in the past have identified it as the concept of Führerprinzip, which is the belief that the Führer was the supreme leader who embodied the spirit of the nation and controlled all areas of its subjects. Hitler at the time was seen as the pinnacle of the Nazi political system, and the subordination of the German populace was the main characterization of Nazi ideology. The Nazi administration was aggressive with their foreign policies. The policies made were largely intended to benefit Germany internally, as they were inward-looking policies and rejected internationalism. Although they rejected internationalism, the Nazi government still needed to deal with some foreign affairs. One of the things they did to reject internationalism was pull out of as many international agreements and treaties with other countries as possible. They only signed treaties with nations that they needed to help fulfill their national interests. Typical example of this were the Rome-Berlin Axis Pact, signed with Benito Mussolini of Italy in 1936, and the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, or Soviet-Nazi Non-Aggression Pact, signed with Joseph Stalin of the USSR in 1939. Hitler would also often break the terms of these treaties later, with this proving just how focused and determined the Nazis were regarding the issue of foreign policy and holding German national interests supreme. The political ideology of the Nazis is often considered the biggest aspect of the Nazi ideology and had at its core the supremacy of the party belief and national interests over internationalism. Economic ideology. The economic beliefs of the Nazis can be narrowed down to a term called autarky. Autarky is a German word that translates to the belief that the Nazi nation should be entirely and economically self-sufficient. After World War I in 1918, Germany's economic situation at the time was not favourable. So in the bid to restore the country's economy to a better position, the Nazis deemed it crucial for the German nation to stop depending on other nations to support its economy. You should know that the Nazis were not supporters of internationalism, so it was expected that their economic disposition would align with their political ideology. Nazi economic ideology was therefore largely a derivative of its political ideology, and had the support of the nuances of economic self-sufficiency and ultra-nationalism at its core. Military ideology. Nazi military ideology is one of the most brutal military ideologies to have ever existed, and we'll be revealing why this is so in a bit. During the Second World War, the Nazis planned to expand their territories by invading neighbouring European countries. This ideology was based on a German term called Lebensraum, which translates to living space and refers to Nazi belief that the nation of Germany and the Aryan race needed to expand its territories to exercise its full superiority over other human races. The Nazi German military ideology was essentially an expansionist ideology that supported the expansion of territories by annexing or occupying other territories and incorporating the territory as part of its own. The Nazis understood that for them to achieve this feat effectively, their military would have to be highly trained and equipped with high-grade weaponry extended across territories. A clear example of the Nazi military expansionist movement was the Angulus. This event that later came to be known as the Angelus occurred in the year of 1938 and began with the occupation of the neighboring German-speaking country of Austria by Nazi Germany and led by Hitler. Following this forced occupation, the Austrian territories automatically came under the control of Nazi Germany. Between 1938 and 1945, Hitler's regime attempted to expand and apply Nazi ideologies to territories that were outside the German Reich. In 1939, Germany began to expand to non-German speaking nations as well, especially with the success of the occupation of Austria. Germany invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939 in an event that would later become the precursor to the start of the Second World War. Hitler had spent his first years planning and preparing Germany for the struggle for world dominance and control, and focusing on forging and fortifying the military at the time with the required resources and industrial superiority that the country would need to fulfill its ambitions. With the initial success of the military campaigns of 1939 to 1941, his plan was expanded into a vision of a strong nationalist order that would embrace all of Europe, Western Asia and Africa, and eventually the entire world. The military ideology of Nazi Germany can be summarized as a belief involving the German nation pursuing an expansionist campaign that would allow it to fulfill its supposed national destiny by annexing other territories, occupying them, and possessing a strong, formidable, well-equipped military to guard occupied territories as well as push the German territory further. Social and racial ideology. The social ideology of the Nazis was entirely based on their misconstrued views about race, and which was why it was largely called racial ideology. The Nazi social ideology was centered around the concept of social Darwinism, which they adopted from a theory that promoted an evolutionary view of humans, just like Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. This ideology, which was also very dominant in Nazi Germany, considers the Aryan race the most evolved race of humans and deemed it the most superior of all the races. Luckily for the Germans, they were the descendants of the glorified Aryan race, and other races were deemed inferior and subject to discrimination. Unfortunately for Jews at the time, the theory of social Darwinism considered the Jews' race the most inferior of the white races, and considered the Aryan race as the most evolved. Although this theory was disregarded and termed as absolute nonsense by modern scientists, it was well incorporated and widely popular in Nazi Germany at the time. Hitler found this common denominator in the Jewish people, whom he identified with both Bolshevism and a kind of cosmic evil. Jews were to be discriminated against not according to their religion, but according to their race. Nazism considered and declared Jews as being inferior and harmful to Germans. The Nazis were known for instigating and enforcing racist beliefs and actions against Jews living in Germany at the time, and they justified their actions with the theory of social Darwinism, emphasizing and legitimizing the dominance and superiority of the Aryan race over other races. This led to Germany almost annihilating Jews and segregating them from society. Many Jews in Germany at the time fled to other countries as refugees for their safety from the anti-Semitic acts perpetrated by Nazi Germany. The ideology was further propagated following Hitler's announcement to unite all racially pure German people around the globe in Germany as the People's Community of Germany. There was a movement that emphasized the need for ancestral Germans to return to their ancestral home, and at the same time, the need to purify the state of Germany from racially inferior people and minority groups. Nazi Germany went on an extermination spree to cleanse their country of inferiors. According to the Nazis, they were only doing what needed to be done to maintain the dominance and interest of their state. The Nazis enforced various propagandas that were not humane, but were justified by their racial nationalist ideologies. The extravagant hopes and aspirations of the Nazis' ideologies came to an end with Germany's defeat in 1945 after nearly 6 years of war. The war took a pattern that was almost like the First World War. There was a great initial German military success. Coalitions were formed by different countries to litigate the threat Germany posed, and the eventual loss of the war due to Nazi overreaching and outrageous ideologies. Nazism began to automatically die a natural death after the Second World War in 1945, and especially after Hitler's suicide, which saw him successfully avoid falling into the hands of the Soviet troops during the occupation of Berlin. Germany at the time was divided until 1990, and remnants of Nazi ideologies remained in Germany after Hitler's death, and a small number of Nazi-orientated political parties and other parties were formed in West Germany from the late 1940s. Eventually, these groups were later banned. In the 1990s, a group of neo-Nazi youths in eastern Germany staged attacks on immigrants and desecrated Jewish cemeteries, after which they engaged in a very violent confrontation with the police. In the 21st century, small neo-Nazi groups are still to be found in most European countries, the United States, and Canada. These groups were reported to be rare but not non-existent in the rest of the globe.